Unfortunately, you might see in the next coming year some more high drama. But having said that, we don't see anything in terms of nuclear war. We know many people have a fear about nuclear war. That's not to say that there won't be war, because that's been going on, but nuclear war that is so devastating, and especially at this stage of the game, there's too much at stake in terms of this grand experiment. And so ETs will step in, because nuclear war affects the fabric of space-time. And it has a very negative effect, and it ripples throughout many, many levels and layers of the web of life.
I'd like to welcome to the show Wendy Kennedy. How you doing, Wendy?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to talk to you. We were saying earlier, I'm like, I can't believe our paths have not crossed. We know so many of the same channels and other people and have mutual friends in mind. So I'm so glad that we have you on the show today and to talk to the entities that you channel and to find out a little bit more about your journey as well. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So my first question is, what was your life like before this insanity that is channeling came into your life?
I had a very normal upbringing. I think people are surprised by that. They think, oh, you must have had a unique childhood. But really, things didn't start for me till I was in my mid-20s. And I always had an interest in the paranormal and, ghosts and UFOs and that kind of thing. As I was growing up, I was always drawn to books on those topics. And I would watch sci-fi movies and things like In Search Of, for those who are a little older and remember that, Project Blue Book. So that was always a fascination, but I never dreamed that this is what I'd be doing. But in my mid-20s, I started to have visions and things started to happen and kind of took off from there.
So when did you first discover that you had these abilities of channeling?
Well, looking back now, I can see that things actually did start a little earlier for me when I was in college. And I think I've always been empathic. I think I've always been very sensitive and would pick up on other people's feelings and emotions very easily. But like I said, I was in my early mid-20s and I started having visions and I didn't know what they were. And so I started doing some research on the building that I was living in. I thought maybe it was, a haunting or something like that I was seeing. And as I was doing research on that, I came across channeling and I felt very, very drawn to it. I had this very deep calling to connect with it. And I really didn't know what it was. I didn't know anybody who did it. And I can remember saying to friends, I know this sounds insane, but I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this. And so I did some exercises in books and I would have, some physical responses. My eyes would flutter and I would tingle, but I couldn't get any words out. And I was already doing work on myself at the time. I was meditating and doing yoga. But like I said, looking back now, several years before that, I think I was having past life memories that were surfacing. And I was processing through some of that, which allowed me then to open up to channel. And about 9 months after I started trying to do some of the exercises, because I'd come to it and I put it aside. And one day I knew I was supposed to have pen and paper, and I just sat down and started automatic writing, and it just unfolded from there.
So you didn't have voices come into you, like hearing voices in your head or anything like that until later, but you were looking for you were looking for channeling. It didn't just all of a sudden you wake up and I'm like, why are these voices coming at me?
No, that was not how things unfolded for me. So I was having visions. I was seeing a past life and it was not the happiest image. I was actually seeing somebody hanging and I was coming around the corner and I could see what they were dressed in. And it was always, there were 2 elevators in the building that I was living in at the time. It opposite ends of the hall, and the elevator doors would open all the way to one side. And it always felt backwards when I went to one elevator because it opened to the right and the other one opened to the left. And so sometimes it was as if I could actually touch it it was there as if it was real, and other times it was just a flash that I would have. So for me, it started more with visions. And as it turns out, that was a past life that I was seeing. And then when I started doing the automatic writing, I would hear the words as I was writing them. And then it got to a point, probably about 9 months after I started, where I was hearing the words well in advance of what I was writing. And the guide said, it's time for you to put down the pen and paper and try to channel verbally again. And once I did that, the guides that I work with now with the public, the Ninth Dimensional Pleiadian Collective, they came through because they were waiting for me to channel verbally, because they work with tone and sound. So, they take point whenever I work with the public, but I actually work with a lot of different beings from different star systems.
When this energy comes into you, my understanding of channeling is that you have to be kind of prepped for it. Like your nervous system has to be kind of primed to deal with this higher energy coming in. If not, you can fry the circuits, if you will. Was it like, it seems like you were being primed during that, the automatic writing stage.
Well, I think like anything that we do, if you think about sports, you only have so much endurance, and it's just like that in terms of your nervous system. And for me, I could go about 5 minutes and then I'd fall asleep. I'd fall asleep with, the 3-ring binder marks on my face and wake up, and then I'd go again for a little while, and then I would pass out. I just didn't have the endurance. And over time, it got stronger. My abilities got stronger. I processed more of my own stuff, which really is the key to being able to channel, because, it's the difference of being in the heart-centered space or whether you're up in the ego mind where all the programs of lack and limitation and separation exist. So it's really learning how to move into that heart-centered space and stay there more often, because, in order to sustain that high vibration, you've got to clear out that lower stuff. And as you start to process your own limiting beliefs, then you can stay in that space and you can channel. Everyone has the ability to do this. It's just, how skilled are you at remaining in your heart center space?
Right. All of us can throw a basketball into a hoop, and not everybody's Michael Jordan, essentially.
Right.
That's hopefully. So now, but are you now at a point where it gives you energy when you channel? Does it take energy away from you? How long can you go now without really getting tired?
I can go for hours now without really getting tired. It depends on the size of the group that I'm channeling for as well, because there's a lot of space that also gets held in the frequencies that get transmitted. So the larger the group, the more I have to stretch, the bigger container, if you will, I have to hold. So there are a lot of variables with that, but my stamina is much, much greater now. And it actually does give me energy for the most part. I used to do many years ago private sessions, and I would do them even when I was sick, because the moment that I would go into the space to channel, I'd feel well, and I would feel much better for probably a half hour to an hour after I channeled, because I was still in that high vibrational state. And then slowly I would go back to where I was. So I always felt better when I worked, when I wasn't at my peak.
Right. So what is your process of channeling? Does it come through you? You're a trance channel, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I'd
Or
probably say
not?
semi-conscious channel. Yeah. So
Semi-conscious.
I'm aware, I'm conscious of the information, but it's like a lucid dream for me. So it fades pretty quickly.
Okay. So it's that way. But when so you kind of just step aside, essentially. Do you hear do you hear the words that are coming out? Do you hear? I'm thinking of Chris Tucker from Rush Hour. Do you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? But is that the way? Do you actually listen? You can hear it while you're sitting by, or kind of like witnessing it?
Yes. Yeah.
But
So I'm aware of it. Sometimes when we're very present and the words just come out when we're speaking naturally,
Sure.
There's no censoring going on. There's not that split second where you kind of hear and know the words and then they come out of your mouth. It's instantaneous for me. So, yeah, I'm aware. And sometimes it's just kind of a curiosity. It's, oh, well, what are they going to talk about today? Because I don't really know. They haven't really prepped me. And it's kind of fascinating sometimes to be witness to that, because I don't really know what I'm talking about or where it's going.
how long ago did you actually start doing this in a more professional, and when you came out of the closet, if you will, the channeling closet, how long ago was that?
Well, I came out pretty quickly. I told people that's what I did. And then I would channel for friends and I had some clients, but as a formal business in 2004.
Okay.
So it's
So
been
then,
almost 20 years.
all right. So then 20 years ago, channeling, not as mainstream as it is, and still not
No.
super mainstream. But again, we're having these conversations now. So there's in a public forum, which is a lot more than it was 10 years ago, but let alone 20 years ago. How did the people around you, your friends, your family, your colleagues, just kind of look at you and go, I'm sorry, you're what? So how did they deal with you, and how did you deal with it on a just psychological standpoint of, what other people were thinking about what you were doing at that time?
Yeah, I think I probably told my parents about 6 months after I started, and I wasn't quite sure how they would respond, but they were very open and supportive. And my brother, has always been into metaphysics. And um, so that was always a relationship where we could have conversations about this kind of thing. So he was always there, and he's one of my greatest supporters. And my family is tremendously supportive of me. My friends, they got it. They were curious, they were like, well, will you do it for me? I've got lots of questions. So I think also it was the time of my life in my mid-20s. And I was pretty bold. So I was pretty open about what it is that I do. I probably today, especially living in the South, I probably am not telling people or going into depth is probably what I should say about what exactly it is I do in casual conversation. I think in my mid-20s, I just flat out told people. So, now I don't do it for shock value or anything like that. It's just, if you're curious, I'll tell you a little bit more about what it is. And it's interesting, people's responses. They're like, oh, or they've got questions. So I know immediately when I get they don't really know what it is. They don't really understand it. They're not sure if they want to ask. And otherwise people get it. And they're usually like, oh, I've had this experience, or I've had that experience. And that's amazing to me. How many people have had experiences, but nobody's talking about it.
Isn't that fascinating too? Because I've had that experience as well ever since I started this show, is where so many people come up to me now. They're like, my grandmother had the gift, or, I saw this when I was a kid, or can we really talk? Like, are we in a simulation right now? Like, and we have these, like, can we talk about quantum physics really quickly, or spirituality and things like that? But they don't come out with it publicly, but they will, at a party, sitting around in the corner somewhere, they'll ask these kind of questions. There's a massive curiosity about these kind of conversations. I think they're becoming more and more, if the numbers of our show is any indication, there are more and more people searching out for this information because it's now readily available. It wasn't 20 years ago. I mean, 2004, when you started, the internet was still pretty much in its infancy. And if you did find something about these topics, be careful the websites you found.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, when I first started, I would do like the Conscious Life Expo, the Conscious Living Expo. I mean, that's how you connected with people, because it was difficult to find on the internet.
Yeah, but now it's a lot more open, definitely, without question. Now, can you share a specific instance that your channeling had a profound effect on someone's life, a client or someone at an event or something?
I'm still surprised by that, because I get emails all the time just saying how much things have helped them to transform, or just little hits that that I might give someone that will help them. I remember channeling for someone, and it was just so random. The guides were like, you've got a cookbook to write. And the next thing out of their mouth was, oh, we were just discussing that last night. So, it's the little things like that, just little hits that can help somebody on their path. And sometimes when people connect with the material, they don't always recognize when they first connect with it, the impact that it has on them. I channeled for a client once, and she was coming back for a second session. And she said, I hung up the phone after the first session, and I thought, well, that wasn't very good.
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, you're back. And she said, and then I listened to the recording again 6 months later, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then she said, I listened to it a year later and I got answers to every question I asked. I just couldn't hear it at the time. So that was a big moment for me. I think just to trust in that people get exactly what they need in the moment. And sometimes we don't know what that initial catalyst is that can create massive change. But I trust that people get exactly what they need out of it.
What's the biggest misconception that people have about channelers?
Well, one, I think they think that just a few people can do it.
Mm.
And, like you were saying, is everybody going to be an NBA star? No, but it doesn't mean that they don't enjoy playing. And it's the same thing with channeling. We all have access to this higher vibrational energy. And the guides spend a ton of time talking about the process of manifestation and how we work with subtle energies and how we connect with these higher frequencies, whether we want to access our guides, source energy, the Akashic records. It doesn't matter what it is that we want to access. The process is the same. So really, it's just about moving from that ego mind and back to that heart-centered space where you have access to multidimensional information. So I think the fact that people think it's hard or just a few people do it is probably the biggest misconception that I experience.
What's the biggest challenge that you face as a channel?
I think like everybody, there's still moments of doubt that I'll still have, especially if I am channeling information for myself. And I'm invested in the answer. Because there's a lot of weight, a lot of responsibility that to get it right, I think. So for me, I'm always trying to make sure that I am as centered and as clear as I can possibly be. I think that program goes into past lifetimes for sure, but it's not as strong as it used to be. When I first started, I think I trust a lot more, but when it's something that's important, when it's somebody who's close to me, I have to check in a couple times just to make sure that I'm getting the same information. I'll ask a couple times in a couple different ways.
How do you balance this side of your world with like just living an everyday human existence on this planet? Because having, universal knowledge at the tip of your fingertips as you're walking through life is there's an adjustment period, to say the least. But how do you even balance, the amount of knowledge that you've either gotten access to or just through your work over the last 20 years, you've heard so much and you understand what the game is at a deeper level than most walking the earth. Most of us are caught up in like, okay, I got to pay my bills. Oh my God, what did she say? Oh, what do they think of me? That kind of minutia. I'm assuming you're human. You still have, foibles and all that kind of stuff as well, but you understand it at a different level. So how do you balance just the daily, I wouldn't say BS of being a human in the world, but the kind of stuff that is the monotony of being, of this kind of stuff from other people and you and this other side of you as a channel?
Well, to me, it's just normal. It's kind of abnormal to be disconnected. So it feels natural and it just is how life is for me. For me, my guides are very respectful. They have never been ones who kind of barge in or, it's not like I hear loud voices in my head or something like that. For me, I might get, some hits, some signs that, oh, maybe I need to stop and check in. Because if they were constantly at my door, I wouldn't be doing the work. That's just my personality. So if they want to work with me, they know how to work with my personality type. So, I think their lessons, their life lessons, the way that we manifest, that helps me to maneuver through some of the challenges that life presents. I think I just have a slightly different lens to look at it. It doesn't mean that it's always easy, but I put into practice the things that they've taught me, and their message really hasn't changed in almost 30 years. It's really back to basics, how to live from your heart, how to recognize when you're running from a program of fear, you're running from that level, that perspective, and shifting out of it to look at things in a new way. How can I express more of my divine light in this moment? What is this moment showing me? How am I expressing or suppressing my divine light? And I think looking at it that way, it just makes it easier to move through it. But again, there are times where things are super challenging, and it might take me a while to get to that space. Like, okay, I need to go back and, practice what I preach here. I need to go back to ground and center and kind of check in again. But like I said, for me, it's so ingrained in my reality that I kind of check in naturally on a more regular basis, where I think most people will go a longer period before they'll stop. They'll get some sort of high drama that gets their attention.
Right. Exactly. Like a pandemic that stops everything in the entire world for a second. Now, I have to imagine that during the course of your career doing this kind of work, you've run into a slight bit of skepticism along the way. How do you deal with skeptics? And if there's someone watching who is going, this is nuts, this is hogwash, I can't believe people are buying this. I always like playing devil's advocate, because I have an answer to this question from my experience of just talking to so many channels. But I'd love to hear your point of view.
I don't get too much of that. I get some occasionally, and I used to get more of it because I think at this point, I really don't care. And because I'm not putting that out, that fear of attack in the same way, the attack doesn't come. And, I always say, take what resonates. And if it doesn't resonate with you, that's perfectly fine. And most people who are that skeptical aren't finding the information. They're not, especially 20 years ago, they weren't going to find it unless they were looking for it. Today, because it is a little more mainstream, some people who might be on the edge. But the interesting thing with that is that they might not believe it that first time.
Right.
But then it's like that first exposure is planting some seeds, and they're like, okay, well, I've heard this before. And then they have another experience. And it's like, okay, well, this keeps coming up. And so I trust that. I trust in the divine timing of things. But it's okay if you don't believe it. And I hope that you would kind of question everything and kind of check in with yourself and does this resonate with my version of reality? And if not, that's fine.
Yeah, I always say to people, just don't look at the messenger, look at the message. Is what she or he is saying resonating with you? Is it helping you in your life? If it isn't, discard it and move on.
Yeah.
But if it is helping you, then investigate more. But you should question everything. Absolutely. I agree with you. Be a skeptic, but not a pessimist. There's a very big difference between the two, without question. Well, we've been speaking about these guides for a little while now. So do you mind if we ask the guides some deep questions about why in heck are we here and what are we doing and all sorts of other fun stuff?
Sure. So typically the ninth dimensional Pleiadian collective comes in first and foremost. I'll tell you just a little bit about them. They are a group of about 2,500 beings of light. They don't have physical form. A lot of times people say, oh, the Pleiadians, they must be, blonde hair, blue-eyed Nordics, but these beings are just light. And they do work with tone and sound, which is why their dialect is different than my own. It's really not any one particular dialect. It's elongated vowels that they can modulate. They can work with the frequency in the vowel. And it's as if you're getting a healing. So, if you're listening, you probably want to make sure you drink plenty of water over the next several days just to help move the energy through the body.
All right. Sounds good.
So I'll get out of the way and we will see where we go.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, hello, dears. This is the Ninth Dimensional Pleiadian Collective, and it is a pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to connect with you. So there's a lot of ground to cover. We've got a few things to say here, and then we'll take your questions. So we've got the opportunity. We want you at this time to really start thinking outside the box, because that's where all the new things are going to be coming from, outside the box. You know what is inside the box. So really think about the frequencies that you want to hold, that you want to experience in your reality. You don't have to determine the form of what it is that you want to see reflected back to you, but the essence of it. You want to experience joy, happiness, peace, abundance, connection, whatever it is. Put your focus there. Imagine what it would feel like to embody those frequencies. And as you do, you will start to create new institutions, new avenues of expression and experience for yourselves that are new and unique, things that you haven't done before. But if you keep looking for the old image outside of you of what it is you want to manifest, it's going to be hard for you to create something new. So start by focusing on frequency. And we can certainly get into more details about that if you wish, but we just wanted to put that out there. We'll go ahead and we'll take your questions and kind of see where we go.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. What key changes do you see for humanity's future?
Well, there are massive changes that you are in the throes of right now. And sometimes that's hard for you to really see because you are in the thick of it. You don't have any perspective. And as you go through the course of probably the next 2.5 years, you're going to find some radical change on the planet. Now, Earth right now is going through an ascension process. It just means there's an increase in the resonant frequency, so much so that you will cross a dimensional barrier. Dimensions are structured like sports, like games. They have fixed rules to them. And it's just a unique experience to go into a particular dimension and explore it. 3D has very fixed rules of the game to it. You've got the perception of time, the idea that time is linear, that you move from past into present and then into future, that you've got duality. There is light, dark, good, bad, right, wrong. And, there's a big extreme between those poles of duality where you're moving into. You are aware that you are part of source energy, part of all that is. You can, in any given moment, perceive yourself as being separate from source energy or part of the whole, part of the collective. And that is different than where you are right now, because right now, most of you have no awareness of your true divine nature, of that deep, deep connection that you have. There is a certainty to it in the fifth dimension, but you are able to act as if you are the actor playing the character. Right now, most of you have forgotten that you are the actor playing the character. You just think the character is real. And this is what's going on. And then in the fifth dimension, you experience all things at once. Past, present, and future are one. They're just different frequencies that you focus your consciousness on to have the experience. But because the third dimension and the fifth dimension were so vast, you created an entire dimensional range to explore, to maneuver yourself there. So really you're in the fourth dimension, but you project 3D rules of the game onto 4D or 5D rules onto it. And you can go back and forth. And this is what you're in the middle of. And as you go through the next 2.5 years, you're going to start moving more into that fifth dimensional energy until you can sustain it. And at that point, you will actually move into the fifth dimension, and that is a permanent state of being. You've got to alter your chemical structure, your physical body to go along for the ride. And right now, this is a grand experiment. You've been given genetic material from thousands of worlds to seed your planet. And along with that genetic material comes all of the emotions, all of the knowledge and wisdom of those species that becomes available to you very easily. And there are many beings who are observing what's going on because they are connected genetically to you as a planet. They may not be perhaps species that have donated genes that went into humans, but rather maybe aquatic life. But they are still able to access the library that is Mother Earth to learn how to work through particular issues that you may be struggling with here on this planet. And we call this the grand experiment. We also call Earth the planet of emotion. If you want to learn how to explore emotion, how to handle emotion, this is where you come, because you've got such a wide range. And the beautiful thing about that is that it allows you so many possible combinations of working through challenges. And there are planets and worlds that don't have all this variation. And so it makes it very difficult to make these shifts and adjustments. They're hard shifts, where here it's more subtle and you can maneuver yourself in a much easier fashion. But as you go through this ascension process, one of the things that you are mastering is compassion. Because it's so dense here and it is so challenging, you are able to access compassion because you've been there, you've done that, you've all had those challenges. You felt that heartache, that pain, that struggle, that strife, that you are able to hold a very intense level of compassion for others. And that is the gift that you share with the universe. Because there are some beings who are not able to access this frequency, or if they can, it's certainly not in the way that humans can and will. And so as you go through the ascension process, you radically alter the universal game. So that's the importance of what's going on. That's why there are so many ETs who are present, who are watching, who are assisting you. And the next several years bring with it the opportunity for great change. But you are in the middle of what we call frequency wars. And that began in 2019. And you've got a couple more years before you move out of that. And it is a vying for control over your vibrational essence, the frequency of your thoughts, your emotions, and your physical structure. So as you learn how to master your responses, the vibrations that you live in other words, the frequencies that you sustain. Are you in anger all the time? Are you in a sense of grace? Are you in a sense of gratitude? Are you in a sense of joy? Is that the energy that you put out, or are you frustrated? So having an awareness of that and coming back to the frequencies that you want to emit can create radical change on your planet. And right now you are becoming more and more aware of the game that is being played out on the planet. There are beings who have kind of been controlling and manipulating things on this planet for the better part of about 40,000 years. And really quite hardcore within the last 12. So you're beginning to see this. You're beginning to become aware of the game that's being played, and you're taking back your power. You're deciding that, all right, I've been living under this illusion. I haven't really been thinking about, oh, is this what I want or not? You've just kind of been going along with the status quo, and now you're questioning. You're deciding what it is that you want as you build and move forward. And that is a radical shift in mindset and in what you will create as a human species. All right. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question.
For very detailed. Thank you. Why are we currently going through such wars like overseas in the Middle East and other areas of the world? Why are we going through these wars right now? And all the suffering that humanity is going through because of these wars. What is the spiritual purpose or evolutionary purpose of these things?
Well, you haven't learned when that's occurred in the past. You haven't paid attention. You haven't questioned. You haven't examined what's been going on or taken action on what's been going on. You know, many times people on the planet may have had an awareness of what was happening, but it didn't mean that they took action. They made change. And sometimes they might make a little change, but it wasn't enough soon enough in order to kind of radically alter the game. And so now you are getting what we call high drama. Drama happens when you're not paying attention to get your attention. And there are so many people who are still asleep that you need high drama to really see what's going on. And you're seeing this in all the control mechanisms that are happening in all the various levels within the worldwide institutions. And you know, whether you're talking about politics, whether you're talking about governmental bodies, whether you're talking about financial institutions, educational institutions, you're seeing all of this happening, and you can't unsee it. And this will inspire you to make change. It will move you. All right. And for those who have been hitting the snooze alarm, the time has come. All right. They can't ignore it anymore because it's really in their face and they're feeling very uncomfortable as a result of it. Unfortunately, you might see in the next coming year some more high drama. But having said that, we don't see anything in terms of nuclear war. We know many people have a fear about nuclear war. That's not to say that there won't be war, because that's been going on, but nuclear war that is so devastating, and especially at this stage of the game, there's too much at stake in terms of this grand experiment. And so ETs will step in, because nuclear war affects the fabric of space-time. And it has a very negative effect, and it ripples throughout many, many levels and layers of the web of life. And so that is monitored. We will allow species to do it to a certain extent. And when it becomes too damaging, then ETs, historically, those who have had a higher resonance, a higher perspective, have stepped in. And that is certainly the case here. So we don't see anything like that specifically happening. But it doesn't mean that it won't be challenging as you are going here. And again, it's just to get you all to wake up, to take action, and to decide the frequencies that you want to see reflected back to you. And that's the other thing that we'll say right here, is that, even though there may be chaos, there may be challenges outside in the world, it doesn't mean that your life has to be filled with chaos and challenge in that same way. The world might have struggles with the financial institutions, but that doesn't mean that you have to live in a state of lack, a state of fear about abundance. Abundance comes in many forms, and your reality, what you're capable of perceiving, is based off the filters that you're holding. So if you have a belief that things are going to be hard because the financial markets are going to be down, then that is the reality that you will create for yourself. But if you can imagine abundance flowing to you in infinite ways, then you are not going to be struggling in the same way. And you will be the lighthouse, the living example for others to be reminded of a frequency that is their true divine nature. As you hold it, they can remember, and they'll say, oh, that frequency, that feels really good. I want more of that. Or they may say, oh, I remember that. I forgot about it. I forgot I can access that. And sometimes this happens solely at the subconscious level, that they are reminded that there is more in life, that they don't have to feel like they are being held down, that they can open and stretch and rise. And so this is why it is so important for those of you who are listening, who, maybe this is your first foray into this knowledge and information. You don't have to necessarily don the mantle of someone who is into metaphysics. It's about living from the heart-centered space. And so as you do that, and as you extend kindness and gratitude, that frequency is of a much higher vibration, and you can have a huge impact on those around you. So do not underestimate your own power. You might say, I'm not a healer. I'm not a channel. What can I do in terms of spreading higher frequencies? It's about extending kindness and grace and joy, and be the living example for others to be reminded of who they are.
What advice do you have for finding peace amongst all of this global turmoil currently happening?
It starts first inside of you, that you find peace within yourself. So where are you warring within yourself? Where are you torn within yourself, and making peace with that? Because a lot of times these programs of lack, limitation, and separation, this idea, this expectation doesn't match reality, but you've had it for so long that you haven't really stopped to question it. And so when you feel that conflict within yourself, we would say, go to the heart-centered space. Now, you might say peace. We've heard you say heart-centered space a dozen times. What does that mean? It means thinking of something that makes you smile, putting yourself in that frequency. You can think of a baby animal, they're great, or a location that might make you feel uplifted, expanded, warm, tingly. That's usually the sensation most of you have when you find the right frequency. And this expanded state allows you access to multidimensional information. And you can then get hits and ideas of what you need to do, what steps you might need to take, what changes you might need to make, what calling you might have. And one of the things that you all are being tasked with right now is to be better listeners, not only for other people, but listen to yourself. Listen to that inner calling. Listen to that inner child, if you will. What is it that you really want? Many of you don't even stop to think about that. And as you do so, as you start listening to you and your own inner voice, your inner guidance, listen to what others have to say. Listen with an open mind, because what you find out is that at the end of the day, most of you want the exact same things. You just think that there are different ways of going about it, and that's where the conflict starts. So if you can get out of your ego mind that says, I have to be in a defensive posture because if you take what's mine, then I have nothing, because we live in a finite reality, and that's an illusion. There is an infinite amount of everything, and it is literally pulled and created and generated out of the ether. So as you can show up in that heart-centered space to listen, you will also find solutions. That's the other amazing thing, that when you go into the heart-centered space, you are accessing solutions. So every challenge and every solution are created at the same time, because you live in a dualistic universe. They're two sides of the same coin. They're just in different vibrational ranges. So when you have your challenge, that's usually up in the ego mind and in the ego programs, and you can only see that one side of the coin because that's the setup for the ego mind. And then as you move into the heart-centered space, you elevate your resonance and you can start to see the solution energy. And this is what will help you as you stay in that heart-centered space, that you can really hear what others are saying. And really what you'll find, it's not the people, it's the governments. It's those who are trying to control and manipulate the masses that are generating the wars. It's not the individuals for the most part. All right. When you really sit down and put a face to it, it's very hard for you all to war, for you to hold such hostility and anger. It's easier when it's an idea that is far removed from you. And when you get to know someone and you listen to them, you say, oh, I want the same thing. But it starts first inside. And when enough of you start to hold that resonance collectively, it impacts the whole. It makes it much easier for those on the planet to access that frequency, to find that energy, to be reminded of that energy. What does peace feel like? You are being fed a steady diet of negativity in your mainstream news and even in your alternative news. It's all focused on the negative. And so that is what you generally see in the world. There are many, many, many beautiful positive things that go on in the world. And if you had a positive news report every day, you'd have a very different world.
What are some key milestones in humanity's evolution?
Oh, there are many.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about the most recent?
Well, no, we're talking about the key milestones that are happening in the future, in the next 5 to 10 to 20 to 50 years.
Well, the next big one, the next 2 years are quite intense.
Mm-hmm.
When you get through the end of 2024, you're going to have a clearer idea of the pathway that you want to take, and it will be challenging for the 2 years that follow. As you start to put these practices in place, and some will say, yes, we want this. No, we don't want that. So it will take a lot of conversation. It will take a lot of listening, and that's a skill. And you will be building mastery over that skill of listening and holding compassion. So that's huge for humanity, because remember what we said, compassion is the gift that you share with the universe. So it is affording you the opportunity over the next 2 years to really master that energy. When you get into 2026, the probability of having connections with the ET community in a very direct way is there. We don't make a lot of predictions, but this one is so strong that we feel confident in sharing it with you. When we make predictions, or when people make predictions, your focus on that as a reality impacts the probability of that becoming a reality. And we want you to have free will. We want you not to be influenced so much in that regard of something coming in the future. We want to influence you in terms of you deciding the energy that you want to project and creating your own future. So when we look at this, it's quite strong. And how that is going to play out exactly, we are not sure. There's still some variables there, but it is quite strong that you'll have ET contact in a very direct way, in a very global way that is beyond a shadow of a doubt, and will become part of your reality, your understanding of yourself as part of the galactic community. And when that happens, it radically alters your game. Beings on the other side, those ETs, some are physicals, some are non-physicals. We have been standing back a bit, waiting for you to find your voice, to stand in your power before we showed up. Because if we showed up and you weren't in your power, you'd still be playing the same game out, just interdimensionally. Right now you're giving your power away to your officials and some ETs who are behind those officials. So we're waiting for you to stand in your power, because otherwise it generates too much fear, and that is contrary to where we want you to go. So by then, you will have accessed more of your personal power, which will then be easier for you in terms of standing in your power interdimensionally, so to speak. At that point, when ETs show up, you will look at your energy systems in a very different way. How you relate to your planet, how you relate to each other, how you think about yourselves. You won't so much think about yourselves in terms of being American or Canadian or Brazilian or Australian. You'll think of yourselves as being human. And that's very different. And it will spark many ideas and curiosities. And humans are recognized throughout the entire galaxy as being kind of amazing creators, because remember all this genetic material and all the emotions and all the subtle nuances and ways of being creative, that you all are ingenious when it comes to new technology and new ways of creating systems and patterns. You are truly at the heart of who you are genetically, beings who are curious and can think outside the box when given the opportunity. We know that there are many on the planet, as we said, who are stuck in the box. So once that illusion is shattered, humanity will contribute quite a bit to the galactic community.
With the pace of the change in our world, what guidance do you offer for those feeling overwhelmed or lost?
You need a practice. And by practice, we mean coming back to your heart-centered space. It's very simple. You don't have to spend hours in meditation, but it's about coming back to the awareness of who and what you truly are, and then checking in. Where are you vibrating? Oh, I'm in fear. I'm in overwhelm. Overwhelm is about an expectation that you feel that somehow you aren't meeting. And it's a projection of energy into a future now moment that you're not standing on. All right. So all your power lies here in the now. So as you come back to the now and you focus on what needs to be done right here, right now, what's showing up for me as my reality, then you're empowered and you are able to make adjustments, have awarenesses of things that need to be done or things that need to be shifted in your perspective of reality. So having a practice is important, and you can set an alarm for yourself. So you might want to practice checking in once an hour. Where am I vibrating? Oh, I'm in a pretty good space. And do I want to stay here? Yes, I'd like to stay in this space. And then imagine the frequencies you want again. And if the answer is no, I'm exhausted. Well, start breathing. All right, for yourself in the heart center space. The thing with being in the ego mind is that there is a judgment, and you needed the ego mind to play in the third dimension. You needed judgments. You needed to operate under the perception of lack, limitation, and separation. This was a game of dissension and reascension. You thought as a soul, can I go into density, forget who I am, and come back out of it? And so here you are at the master level trying to achieve that. But in order to do that, you needed some programs, some illusions. And this is very special, this dimension, because there's no other dimension where you get to explore this illusion of separation, this illusion of linear time. Because if you don't know what's coming, you can't see it. It dramatically changes the experience of the moment. Think about it like a movie where you've seen the trailer and you've seen a particular scene, and you know around the next corner there's somebody who's going to jump out. When it comes to that scene in the movie, you already have a sense of what's coming, and so you don't have the same experience as you're watching the complete movie or experiencing the complete movie that you would have had if you hadn't seen the trailer. So it's the same thing here. If you don't know what's coming, it makes the moment unique. And that's why all of you love to incarnate here and play in this arena. So having the practice will help you because when you judge something, you say, I like this thing, I don't like this thing, or I want this thing because I want to avoid the negative. You're cutting off half of source energy, because even that thing that gets the label of negative is source energy. And it's an illusion, but you are still trying to block half of source energy flowing through you. So this is why when you hold judgments, the energy gets stuck in your body, because you are trying to hold it at bay instead of allowing it just to flow through you. It's an experience. It's a valid experience. It's a valid expression of source energy, whatever it is. Doesn't mean that you have to align with it. Doesn't mean that you have to vibrationally support it with your energy. It just means it has a valid right to exist, because it's an exploration, and it is oftentimes a counterpoint, or it is something that helps to define the light. If you don't know what the shadow side feels like, it makes it very difficult to know what the light really is, or vice versa. All right. When you know what the absence of something feels like, then you have a greater understanding of the thing itself, that light itself. When there's no contrast, it's very difficult. So right now, as you are living in this reality, you will hold half of source energy at bay. So if you're feeling fatigued, all right, in any way, it's because of these fear programs. And that means putting yourself back in your heart center will allow the full force of source to flow through you, because there are no filters of lack, limitation, and separation there. It is just pure source energy that can flow at that level. And it can recharge you quite quickly if you can sustain that frequency. The challenge is that most of you can't sustain it. You know, back to what you were asking Wendy about before, there is stamina that has to be built up. And it requires a practice. And once you do that, you don't need sleep in the same way. You don't need nutrition in the same way, because you are living off pure source energy. And so the body can be sustained on the light. You're not there yet energetically to just be sustained, because you're not doing it enough to sustain it within the physical structure, but you're getting there. And once you cross into the fifth dimensional level, you're not going to eat in the same way. You will just simply work with the photonic energy. You'll run off of that as you connect with it.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
You are loved. You are seen. So many of you feel disconnected. You feel alone. And let us tell you, you are never alone. There are so many beings who are constantly with you. You all have your own guides who have been with you throughout your entire life. And then part of your stellar family has shown up at different periods. They're in, they're out. So it's a full house for all of you. And it's just a matter of you grounding, connecting with the earth. If you can get out on the earth with your bare feet, great. If not, just imagine connecting with the heart light of Mother Earth. She will give you instructions about the resonance that you are meant to be holding to connect with all that is. And as you do that, then put yourself in your heart center, ask your question, and listen. It might feel like your imagination at first, but then we say go with it. And if you need confirmation, ask for it. And if you think, oh, well, I just saw repeated numbers, or I overheard this conversation, is that my confirmation? Then take it as such, because the thought wouldn't cross your mind otherwise. But no, there is a tremendous amount of support that is always around you. You have everything you need within yourself. You have all the best answers within yourself. We don't have any answers that are better for you than the ones you have within yourself. So trust in yourself. You are quite powerful and you are quite magnificent. Until we hear from you, we are around. We appreciate the opportunity to connect. We are watching, we are waiting, and we are sending many, many well wishes.
And she's back.
So they're the P's.
How are you feeling?
A little spacey.
A little spacey?
Honestly, it takes me just a minute to really come back.
A little woozy, like you had a little too much to drink?
A little lightheaded.
Oh, they were wonderful. They're wonderful. Yeah, they answer questions in depth without question.
Say the least, with a lot of tangents.
Yes, but it's beautiful. It's great information. So I hope it really does help some people along their path. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. I ask all of my guests now. If you're ready, I don't want to throw you in after you feeling too woozy. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
I think it's about connection and being able to connect with those that you love and with yourself and with source energy. So fulfilled for me means connection.
If you can go back in time and speak to little Wendy, what advice would you give her?
Don't overthink things. I think don't spend so much time trying to figure things out. Just be. I think it's good advice for all of us. I think we're trying to control and manipulate and figure out how we're going to get from A to B. And if we just relax just a little bit, it'll unfold.
How do you define God or source energy?
All that is. It's interesting. That's the one question I have asked the guides, and it's the one that they say they can't answer for several reasons. One, because of the level of consciousness that we're currently holding. We're playing in this game. So we're playing in lack and limitation and separation. So we can't even begin to comprehend it. But they say that the way that they see it and the only way that they can explain it is that it is all that is.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
Adventure, exploration of frequency.
And where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing in the world?
You can find me over on our website at higherfrequencies.net. And then you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at HGR Frequencies. So, yeah.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
I think it's probably echoing what the piece said, that you are far more powerful than you give yourself credit for, and that we have a ton of support. Sometimes we can feel a little lost, a little alone, and, our guides are here to support us. So when we get quiet and we get centered, then we can hear what they have to say and trust what you're getting. Sometimes it feels like your imagination, but go with it anyway. After a while, as you start to practice, you'll notice that has a different energetic quality than just your imagination. It feels very rich. It feels very full when you're tapping into higher information. I like to say, even with the guides, when I channel, what I might say is that it's a nice day, but I know it's 75 degrees. The birds are chirping. The grass is green. There are children laughing. So there's all this other information and richness that comes with it. And I think when we start to practice and we start to tune in, we notice that it doesn't feel flat like our imagination can sometimes feel.
Wendy, it has been a pleasure and honor speaking to you today and to the P's. And I appreciate not only you being on the show, but for everything you're doing to help awaken the planet. So I appreciate you, my dear.
Oh, thank you so much. And I would say the same to you, bringing so much great information to people. So it's been a joy.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey. And don't forget to subscribe.